A white scar now traces the shoreline of the largest reservoir in the United States. It isn't a mineral deposit. It isn't a temporary geological feature. It is a tombstone, 170 feet tall, etched into the red rock canyons of Lake Mead. This bathtub ring, visible from space, charts the catastrophic decline of the Colorado River. Every inch of that bleach-white rock was submerged for decades. Now it sits exposed, a monument to 2.7 trillion gallons of missing water. What you are looking at is not the sign of a drought, it's the documentation of a system approaching failure. And the most critical part of this story is not that the water is disappearing. It is that we know down to the gallon exactly who will lose it first. It's not an accident. It was a choice written into law more than 50 years ago. To understand what is happening on the Colorado, you have to understand the sheer scale of the river itself. It begins as snowmelt 10,000 feet up in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado and travels 1,450 miles through 7 states and 2 countries before reaching its delta in Mexico. Along the way, it serves 40 million Americans. Its water grows 90% of the nation's winter vegetables. It fills the swimming pools of Phoenix, powers the fountains of Los Angeles. For a century, this single river has been the engine of the American Southwest, the liquid foundation for some of the fastest-growing cities in the country. The entire enterprise was built on a promise. The promise of an endless river. And that promise was based on a lie. Zoom out, and you see the original sin of the entire crisis. It was signed on November 24th, 1922. The place was Santa Fe, New Mexico. 7 men, a commissioner from each state in the Basin, gathered to sign the Colorado River Compact. Their goal was to divide the river's water, once and for all. They measured the river's flow and came up with a number: 15 million acre-feet of water per year. An acre-foot is enough water to cover a football field, 1 foot deep. They split it evenly. 7.5 million acre-feet for the upper basin states of Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico. 7.5 million for the lower basin states of California, Arizona, and Nevada. It was a neat, tidy solution. There was just one problem: the years they used for their measurements. The early 1900s were some of the wettest in the last 1,200 years. They had signed a contract based on a flood. The river, on average, carries closer to 12 or 13 million acre-feet. And with another 1.5 million acre-feet promised to Mexico in a 1944 treaty, the states had legally promised away more water than the river actually contained. For decades, it didn't matter. The reservoirs were full. The system was flush, and the math error was just a footnote in a history book. But now, it is the entire story. This is the part the headlines do not capture. The crisis isn't just about climate change or a lack of rain. It is about a system of law that is now forcing that mathematical error onto one specific group of people. Following the 1922 Compact, the states began to fight over their individual shares. In 1928, Congress passed the Boulder Canyon Project Act. It authorized the construction of Hoover Dam, the colossal structure that would tame the river and create Lake Mead. But it also did something else. It gave California the legal right to the single largest share of the river, 4.4 million acre-feet. California got its water rights cemented into federal law before the other states. This concept is called prior appropriation. First in time, first in right. California was first, and everyone else was second. Decades passed. The dam was built. The Southwest began to boom. But there was a problem. Phoenix and Tucson, 2 desert cities in central Arizona, were beelining toward a metropolitan future with no reliable source of water. They were pumping groundwater unsustainably. Arizona's politicians knew they needed to tap the Colorado. Their vision was the Central Arizona Project, or CAP. It would be one of the most ambitious waterworks ever conceived, a 336-mile-long canal that would lift river water thousands of feet uphill from Lake Havasu and carry it across the desert to the state's urban core. But it would cost billions. Arizona needed federal funding to build it, and to get that money they had to go through Congress, where California's political delegation was waiting. Here is the detail that determines everything. In the 1960s, California's politicians saw Arizona's desperation. They agreed to support the federal funding for the Central Arizona Project, but they demanded a price, a terrible price. The deal was codified in the 1968 Colorado River Basin Project Act. In exchange for their canal, Arizona had to legally agree that its new water supply would have junior priority to California's. In any future time of shortage, When the river ran low, Arizona would take the first and deepest cuts. California's 4.4 million acre-feet would remain protected. Arizona, in effect, signed a contract agreeing to be the system's shock absorber. Tom Boshotsky, the current director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources, is the man whose job is to manage the consequences of that deal. He put it simply, we're going to have to learn to live with less water. He knew his state was at the back of the line. The document signed in 1968 was a ticking time bomb, and in the year 2000 the fuse was lit. The current megadrought began at the turn of the millennium. Tree ring data shows it is the driest 22-year period the region has seen in over 1,200 years. Climate scientist Brad Udall calls it aridification, not a temporary drought, but a permanent shift to a drier climate. The inflows into the Colorado River system plummeted. The reservoirs began to appear. Lake Mead, the nation's largest reservoir, dropped from being nearly full in 2000 to its lowest point since it was first filled in the 1930s. In July of 2022, the water level hit 1,040.58 feet. Full pool is 1,229 feet. The drop triggered the first ever Tier 1 shortage declaration by the federal government, and that declaration set the 1968 contract in motion. Under the rules, a Tier 1 shortage meant Arizona had to cut 512,000 acre-feet of its water supply. That's 18% of the entire central Arizona project's flow. Gone. The water for new housing developments, for farmers in Pinal County, switched off. While across the border, California's supply remained untouched. The time bomb had finally gone off. Now, here is the part nobody is putting on the news. This isn't just a story about two states. It's a story of three cities, each with a radically different fate: Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. On the surface, Las Vegas appears to be the most precarious, a glittering fantasy built in the middle of the scorching Mojave Desert, entirely dependent on a shrinking Lake Mead just 30 miles away. For years, the city was the symbol of unsustainable excess. But while the world was mocking Las Vegas, its water managers were quietly preparing for doomsday. The woman who saw it coming was Patricia Mulroy, the general manager of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, or SNWA, from 1989 to 2014. She understood the vulnerability of depending on a single lake with a fluctuating surface level. The city's original intake pipes were built at high elevations. If the lake dropped too far, Vegas would be cut off. So Mulroy and her successor, John Ensminger, did something extraordinary. They undertook one of the most audacious engineering projects in modern American history. Starting in the early 2000s, they began drilling a new intake pipe, a third one. This wasn't just another pipe near the surface. It was a 20-foot diameter tunnel, 3 miles long, drilled through solid rock 400 feet beneath the lake's surface. At the end of it, a massive intake structure was installed at the very bottom of Lake Mead. They called it the third straw. It cost $650 million and opened in 2020. The purpose of this straw is simple and terrifying. It allows Las Vegas to suck water out of Lake Mead even if the lake level falls below what is known as dead pool. Dead pool is the point at 895 feet of elevation where the water is too low to flow downstream through Hoover Dam to California and Arizona. The dam's outlets sit above that level, but Las Vegas's third straw sits below it. This means that even if Lake Mead becomes a trapped dead lake, unable to supply anyone else, Las Vegas can keep pumping. They effectively engineered their way out of the apocalypse. It's an incredible piece of foresight. Curious what you think about this strategy in the comments. Is it genius or just delaying the inevitable? The city has also become a leader in conservation, cutting its total water use by 47% since 2002, while adding 750,000 new residents. Las Vegas isn't the city that will run out of water first. It might be the last city standing. That leaves the two other giants, Los Angeles and Phoenix. Los Angeles and the rest of Southern California's coastal cities are served by the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, or MWD. They get a significant portion of their water from the Colorado River, but they are insulated by a century of legal precedent. As holders of senior water rights under that 1928 Act, they are at the front of the line. The cuts must fall on someone else before they are touched. That someone else is Phoenix, and its sister city, Tucson. Both are served by the Central Arizona Project, the very canal that was born from that 1968 compromise. The canal has junior rights. This is not an opinion. It is a legal fact written into the operating manuals of the river. when Camille Tutin, the commissioner of the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, orders cuts to protect the system, her hands are tied by a priority list. And at the top of that list of cuts is the Central Arizona Project. This creates a scenario that is almost impossible to comprehend. Imagine a family in a suburb of Phoenix. They could see their water rates skyrocket. They could face mandatory restrictions on outdoor watering, restrictions that could eventually move indoors. New home construction could grind to a halt because there is no legally certified 100-year water supply for them. Their entire way of life, built in a desert metropolis of 5 million people, is threatened by the loss of cap water. Now, picture this. At the exact same moment, 300 miles to the west in California's Imperial Valley, a farmer working for the Imperial Irrigation District, or IAID, opens a canal gate. A torrent of Colorado River water, part of California's legally protected 4.4 million acre feet, floods an enormous field of alfalfa. That crop, which is one of the most water-intensive crops you can grow in a desert, will be harvested, baled, and shipped to feed livestock, some of it overseas. This isn't a hypothetical. It is happening right now. The vast majority of California's Colorado River water, close to 80% of it, doesn't go to cities like Los Angeles. It goes to huge agricultural districts like the IID, which have even more senior rights than the cities. They were there first in time. So while the faucets of Phoenix and Tucson are threatened, the fields of California's desert farms remain green. The system is set up to prioritize farms over faucets. If you have a friend who lives in one of these states, you should probably send them this video. It is a reality that is about to become painfully clear. The situation is made even more precarious by the state of the infrastructure upstream. Lake Powell, the second largest reservoir, sits behind Glen Canyon Dam in Arizona and Utah. Its job is to act as the primary storage account for the whole system, releasing a steady, managed flow of water down to Lake Mead. But Powell is in even worse shape than Mead. Its own bathtub ring is a stark reminder of its decline. And here, the threat isn't just legal. It's mechanical. The dam's turbines, which generate hydropower for millions, were designed to operate with a massive lake behind them. The minimum level required to run the turbines safely is called minimum power pool, at an elevation of 3,490 feet. If the water drops below that, the turbines start to suck in air along with the water. This process, called cavitation, creates violent destructive vibrations that can shatter the turbine blades themselves. It can physically damage the dam. To avoid this, operators would have to shut down power generation entirely. But it gets worse. If the lake drops below the power turbines, water can only be sent downstream to Lake Mead through a set of 4 smaller bypass tubes near the bottom of the dam. These are the river outlet works. They were never designed for constant long-term use. They were designed for emergencies. Running the full force of the Colorado River through these fragile 60-year-old steel pipes for months or years on end is a terrifying gamble. Engineers are not sure they would hold up. If those pipes were to fail, Lake Powell would become a dead pool of its own. It would trap all the water from the upper basin. The flow to Lake Mead and to the 25 million people downstream in Nevada, Arizona, and California would drop to zero. It would be the single greatest water catastrophe in American history. To prevent this, federal managers have taken desperate measures, releasing emergency pulses of water from reservoirs hundreds of miles upstream, like Flaming Gorge in Wyoming, just to keep Powell's level above the brink. It's a basin-wide game of hydrological chess, and one wrong move could be checkmate. All of this is coming to a head right now, because the rules that govern the river are about to expire. The current operating guidelines, established in 2007 and updated with a drought contingency plan in 2019, all expire on December 31st, 2026. Everything is on the table. The 7 states, the federal government, and Mexico are locked in the most consequential negotiation in a century. They must invent a new way to share a river that has fundamentally shrunk. The old way, the 1922 lie, is over. Commissioner Tutin has made it clear that if the states cannot agree on massive, voluntary cuts, somewhere between 2 and 4 million acre feet, the federal government will impose them. It's an ultimatum. Can they rewrite a century of law and politics before the reservoirs hit dead pool? This story is still unfolding, and we'll be covering the results of the 2026 negotiations when they are finalized. If you want to follow along and see that update, now is a good time to subscribe for more videos like this. At the center of the fight are 3 men. There is Tom Bushatsky, fighting for Arizona's survival, trying to undo the damage of the 1968 deal. There is J.B. Hamby, California's commissioner, whose job is to defend his state's ironclad senior rights to the last drop. And there is John Ensminger in Nevada, who quietly built an escape hatch for Las Vegas while the others were arguing. The entire system has been propped up by a few wet winters, like the one in 2023, which gave the reservoirs a brief, temporary boost. But the long-term trend is undeniable, and downward. The fundamental math problem remains. They have promised 16.5 million acre-feet of water from a river that now only provides 12, and the clock is ticking towards 2026. And then there is the existential question buried in the data. What do you do when an entire civilization is built on water that no longer exists? Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the United States. Its economy, its real estate, its future were all underwritten by the Central Arizona Project. The estimated economic damage if that canal runs dry is in the trillions. It is an almost unthinkable collapse. For now, the first cuts have been absorbed mostly by agriculture in Central Arizona, but Tier 2 and Tier 3 shortages loom. Those will cut directly into the water supplies for the cities themselves. Most people who watch for this long often forget to subscribe, so there's your friendly reminder if you found this valuable. The city of Scottsdale has already started cutting off water to some outlying communities that relied on hauled water from the city. It is the first tremor of a much larger earthquake. So the answer to the question is brutally simple. The first major city to lose its Colorado River water will be Phoenix, along with Tucson. Not because of geography, not because of waste, but because of a single signature on a piece of paper in 1968. Las Vegas built its way to safety. Los Angeles lawyered its way to safety. Phoenix signed its safety away. 3 questions now hang over the entire 246,000 square miles of the Colorado River Basin. First, can a legal and political system built for the 20th century adapt to the realities of the 21st?